Welcome back. The reason for this yellow backdrop here is because I noticed the focus programming in this little camera doesn't seem to like to pick up black, especially when the background is got a lot of high contrast angular stuff in it. It's just the way it's wired, so it seems to work a little better this way. Okay, we're at the next juncture in terms of changing up our game a little bit. I'll walk you through where we stand. Notice the profile of the bite zone. Now it's fairly steeply cut in there, and it's let's see, I think around 165. Yep, about 165 thousandths. We're headed down to 150. So that's a good number to stop at, because there's still some scratches and stuff in there that when they come out, you have to remove material. And it's a whole lot better to be working with too much than not enough. The slot looks fine at this point. It's not quite as wide as the finished product, but we'll do that by hand with some little files. I've started to scuff the tape here. If you look carefully, it's not important if you see it, but trust me, I'm beginning to fuzz up the tape a little, and there's a few places where it cut through lightly. So that means we've gone about as far as we can go with the stem on the pipe. And this is where commercial pipe shops in years gone by, in the good old days, you'd take a pipe into a store, a pipe shop, and they'd usually have a repairman in the back. And they'd take a new stem that was usually a blank, like, well, we've seen one wherever I don't know where it went. Yeah, here we go. That doesn't really match the original in shape, but it's smokable, it's fine. And then they put it on there and run this up against a sander, like a French wheel or something similar, and they grind down the shank to get this level. Well, we don't want that. We put in a lot of extra effort to get the shank back to fairly straight. There's still a tiny bit of extra tape here on the end, and I'm undecided what to do about that at the moment, but I'm leaving it for now. We're going to take this thing off of here, and here we go. And do this by hand. Now, let's take a look at those white lines that were put there. Feels like years ago now, doesn't it? Okay, those white lines are still there. And by definition, anything that is, the line is above the level of the shank. So if you bring the Vulcanite down to exactly even with the line, you'll still have a ridge. Now, the frustrating reality of restemming pipes, and the main reason that so many people don't like repair work, is that just a few thousandths of an inch is a very obvious step, a jump there. And getting this perfectly level, getting that joint between the stem and the stem and the bowl here, the shank, perfectly smooth and level is a major pain in the butt. And it never stops being that. There's just, you can make it a little less of a pain in the butt sometimes. So, also notice that these lines are not exactly dead straight. They're very, very close, but not exactly. So you don't want to disregard the fact that even though it's a triangular or square shank, there might still be a very slight amount of rounding on the edge of this. When I say slight, I mean very slight. So how we're going to handle this from here on out Oh, before I forget, my next step here, before reducing it any further, is to put the white dot in. But that is not anything special in the sense that it needs to be covered completely a second time. I'll merely grind off the sharp edges on this, making it a stop sign shape in cross section. Chuck it in a cordless electric drill and spin it in the opposite direction as a belt sander and grind it down into a little, let's see if I got some leftovers here. Yeah, something like this. This is actually a little tool that I made, but anyway, you end up grinding it down and eventually you get exactly the size you want. The only caution is be sure that you match the dot size and the material with what is correct for the period. And this again was from another 1954 ODA, so I know that if I match this, it'll match what was originally in here. And they run from, I believe, around 51 thousandths to a little over 70 thousandths of an inch. But I may or may not do an entire little video on Dunhill dots. I haven't decided yet how many people are really interested in that. But this would be when you want to do it, because no matter how careful you are, if you were to drill this in such a way that you chipped the edge out of, as the bit began to enter and it kicked up a little chip, and you're already at dead flush. Let's pretend this has already been finished completely. Well, there's nothing you can do other than fill that. I mean, you could do tricks with glue and stuff, but it's a whole lot better if you drill the hole, glue in the dot or the rod, and then cut it off and end up with a dot when you've still got a tiny bit of material left to go, so that you'll just sand it down smooth. And if there's a little roughness to the edge of the hole you drilled, that'll go away when you reduce the stem dimension a little farther. So the way this gets done now, I've never had a problem with this or heard people complain about it, but you're free to do whatever you like. I've had people read me the riot act for a long time that I'm going to get like carpal tunnel or something in my left hand from this. No problem so far. Again, watch and see if it's something you want to try. Oh, by the way, Mr. Digression, that's me. Do not be tempted to sand this on a surface like a bowl top. Just because it's flat, the corners of the button would get ground away as well, and that's not what you want. They do in fact rise above that plane even on the finished stem, so that would not be the way to go. So anyway, my sanding method at this point, when I've got these white guidelines, and I do this on any collectible, the very, very low grade stuff that people they're not particular about how level it gets. I'll just sand it down and splash a little stain on the shank. But here we want it just to go down to the level of the white line and absolutely no farther. And I use, for this demo, rather than rig up some more paper, I'll just show you with this edge here, or with this the pad. Normally I'll wrap some sandpaper around this. Usually 400 is a good grit to do this. 320 maybe, 400. If you start putting deep scratches in at this close to the end of the process, you'll have trouble getting them out without making the stem too small. So my technique is to hold it like so, and then use my thumb as the bumper that keeps the board from going off the edge. If you roll it off the end one time, you will jack that edge. You want that to be as sharp as it can possibly be. And with a little practice, hold this at about 45 degrees, maybe a little less, and use the hinge is not in your wrist, it's all in your right elbow. Reverse it, of course, if you're left-handed. and sand down to where you feel the board bump into your thumb. Be mindful of your dwell time and all the stuff we've talked about before. And then hit on it a little bit, wipe it off. Check that it's flat. See how close you are to the line, and continue as needed until you get there. Now, you don't want to completely obliterate the line with a rougher paper. You've got to anticipate the final size and reduce the grit of the paper as the dimension shrinks, meaning when you're in the middle of the white line, you upgrade to a finer paper and so on until 800 maybe is when you finally erase the very last vestige of the line. Now, these top and bottom slopes, they're the very last thing we're going to do. Once everything else is in condition, or in the shape that we want it, we will have 3 points. The corners of the bite zone behind the button, and this little peak over here, and on the bottom we'll have a little ledge thing. But that will merely be an exercise in connecting those points with something that's gently rounded, and then well, I'll talk about it when we get there. But it is far better to leave it to the very end. Do not be tempted to go messing with that top line or the bottom line while you are still working on these sides. Once you get the sides done and it's fitting the stummel, then we'll put it back into the pipe and continue doing the top and the bottom using the bowl as a handle, and it's a bit more controllable that way. We also have to shape the button, of course. No biggie there. So that is it. I will go grind down a white dot, install it, start doing what I just described with this, bringing it down to the white line, and flip the camera back on when I have achieved that dimension. And we'll take it from there.